we go. So hello, and welcome to Resilient Futures number 6 with me, Jane Skuse, and Loic Hares of Resilience Energy, and our guest, Andy Long, startup CEO of Hydro66. I am reading this, I do apologise. An industry disrupting and award-winning 100% renewable powered green co-location and cloud data centre in northern Sweden. If you didn't get all of that, I think Andy's going to be going into that in a moment and talking a bit more about what that is and why we need it. Data feels lightweight and fleeting. I don't think about it very often. It essentially underwrites our entire world. We're going to talk about how Hydro66 are disrupting the data storage industry and lightening the load. Andy, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are doing what you're doing?
Sure, and thank you for having me on the stream. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem.
Yeah, so I mean, Hydro66 is a pretty well established green cloud and data center infrastructure business now. We started in 2014, but the team that conceived of the business had actually been working together for a long time, for 20 odd years, in the UK tech industry, and our DNA has always really been about trying to disrupt markets and trying to innovate to give people a better deal, or to give the planet a better deal. So we, a lot of us started in the 90s with a company called EasyNet, and we were instrumental in democratizing the internet, if you like, taking control away from the large national incumbent and putting in competitive infrastructure.
Was that easy to do?
Say again?
Was that easy to do?
No, not easy at all. It took a lot of legal battles and to get away from this idea of dial-up is enough for everybody. You know, we wanted to give everybody access to broadband, and we did some really fun deals with British Waterways, putting fibre down the canal towpaths. It's a lot easier to dig up mud than it is to dig up tarmac. Putting our own equipment into BT exchanges, and that network that we built is actually still at the heart of Sky Broadband today. So it's servicing, I don't know, 8 or 9 million households around the UK. So that's great. But Hydro is all about the data center and the cloud industry. And we looked at a business in 2013-14 that really was stuck in the past. You know, there's been this idea in Europe, certainly, that the only place to kind of host data, to process information, was in London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and Paris.
In the cities? In
the cities, right. In fact, in the worst possible location you could imagine, right? Let's take the most expensive real estate with the least reliable power, the highest property prices, all the rest of it, and let's do all of our data processing there. I mean, why? And the reason was comms. The cost of fibre meant that everybody had to interconnect in Docklands. Everybody had to interconnect in a couple of buildings in Frankfurt.
So you wanted the data storage in Docklands, like really on site?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So the Telehouse and Telecity, these data centres were in these very expensive locations because fibre was so expensive to get the bits from A to B to C. But that's changed. So just as Moore's law has meant that you know, computing power doubles every 18 months, and that's held true for 50 years, I think now, 40 or 50 years. Moore's law has been accurate. 40. The cost of fibre and the cost of comms has been going down, and what that has meant is you can take the data processing and take the data storage to places that it's much more sensible to do it in, and still communicate with those sites. So for what that means for us, and for companies like Facebook and for Google, who've got very good kind of environmentally responsible policies in terms of where they do their data processing, you take the processing to locations where there is abundant, low cost, 100% renewable energy, and also ideally where it's cold. and you do the work there, and then you just take the bits and you send them down the fibers, and all is fine, rather than doing it in in a city centre with fossil power and with air conditioners running, taking the hot air and cooling it down and spinning it back round again.
I guess there's been a kind of an increase in data, how fast data can travel in kind of, has there in that time, or was there was already cable?
Yeah, not in how fast, but in how much you can send at the same time. Yeah,
yes.
So it's always going to be the same amount of time to get to the coast of the US and back. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what we can do at home, I mean, yeah, today you can turn on your Skybox or Netflix and press the button and you're watching something in 4K and it's just there. There was a time when you'd have had to kind of have somebody post you a DVD, or I mean
that's true.
Netflix started as a DVD rental service, I think.
Netflix, yeah, they did.
Yeah, so it's you can suddenly it's a utility, right? We just expect it to be there, just like with energy, with with you guys at Resilient Energy, kind of innovating what you do with energy in the home. We think of it as just something that's there without necessarily thinking about, well, where's that come from, and am I wasting it? Am I using it? Could I be using this better? And in the current environment with lockdown and so on, and the pandemic, I think we've all lent on technology a lot more. Those of us that weren't already using Zoom or other technologies like it have learned to love it and loathe it, but certainly to adapt to it and use it a lot more, and to use it to connect to our families as well as to connect to other people in the business world. So so go on.
It's a super interesting point you make about the fact that when you use data, and even as we're a tech business, we use data all the time, but you don't think about where that data is stored, or you spin up an instance in the cloud, and you don't think about the impact that it's having. And it's a bit like energy, because I think energy is all around us on a day-to-day basis. And when you turn on your light switch or you use power around your house, you don't automatically think about the impact of that has on the environment. You don't think about the full supply chain of that energy. And so it's quite interesting that there's quite close correlations between the two industries, and it's just something that happens, and you don't really think about it. It's not in your conscious.
I think it's interesting that you say that you work, your business is data, Loic, really. That's I don't know if you might want to say a little bit about what exactly you do, just so Andy knows. But I'm seeing lots of similarities, and rather than me explain what they are, it seems like a good idea that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've developed a platform that connects to energy systems in people's homes. So when we talk about an energy system, we talk about solar panels, and a lot more people are starting to understand about energy storage, so batteries within the homes. So if you've got solar panels and a battery, then our platform can connect with it, and the platform does two things. So the first thing it does, it looks to optimize the system. So we predict when you need energy on a day-to-day basis, and we also know when you'll be generating power from weather, etc. So we can say to your house, you should be storing energy from the grid between the hours of so-and-so and so-and-so, because you won't be generating it. But then you'll start generating it, so you can use that generation when you need it. And we can start maximizing your savings and stuff like that through that. So then the other thing we can do is there's such a thing as on a national level, we can, the grid needs balancing on a constant basis. So Elexon and National Grid look to manage what's going into the system to make sure that it matches what's going out, because energy can't be in excess of power, that it needs to go somewhere. So energy storage, like the batteries connected to our platform, are really useful at taking up some of that extra energy or discharging extra energy when it's needed. We get paid to do so, and we pass that revenue on to the people who own the energy systems. So we kind of call it, our users are able to earn money for saving the planet, because they're the ones who've made the decision to install the solar power and the batteries in their homes. And why not get that extra income for helping society as a whole? And so that's kind of what we do. But it's a data driven business. You know, we design algorithms. We use data from the systems in the homes. We use weather data. We use solar irradiation data, and all of that comes into us, and we use it. So it's really made me, in preparing for today's session, one of the things which really became clear to me was that, you know, we're a tech for good startup. We use technology to try and make, you know, society a better thing. But even us, we haven't taken those steps to look at our whole supply chain to make sure that all of the elements in our supply chain are designed in such a way to reduce the carbon that we emit as a business. So it's made me really think in preparing for today. But, you know, there's some easy steps we can make as a startup to really improve our carbon emissions as a business. So it's been really interesting kind of finding out about that. But you know, data centers has been something which I think everybody in the energy industry it's quite a fascinating area, because when you look at a list of businesses that consume energy, data centers are always right at the top of that list. You know, they're massive consumers of energy. So, you know, whenever somebody kind of thinks about, you know, what kind of market to target, everybody talks about data centers. But it's great to see that there's actually innovation within that market itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing: it's growing. I mean, the data centers used to be a tiny fraction of the total power consumption around the world, and over time the growth has been exponential.
Yeah.
You know, as data permeates our lives, and we've all got gone from no devices to one device to multiple devices to, you know, smart homes and internet of things everywhere. It's only going to keep going up. So I think it's up to almost double digits percentage, or it will be a double digit percentage soon, of global energy consumption, which is just insane. And so because of that, it's really important that when we think about where to put these things, you know, we put them in responsible places and don't you know, burn fossil fuels or do unnecessary cooling, and we use the most efficient technologies. I mean, efficiency is something as well as just the kind of the energy source, because old designs and old infrastructure builds from 20 years ago are very much focused on taking the same air around in a circle and kind of putting it through an air conditioning unit and cooling it down again, which wastes a lot of energy. If you spend any time talking to people about you know, green data centers, it won't be long before somebody mentions the three letters PUE. So PUE is power usage efficiency.
Yeah.
And, you know, in theory, a perfect data center is a PUE of 1, which is every kilowatt hour of power that goes in is used to actually run equipment. And if it was 1.5, then for every kilowatt hour that goes in, half a kilowatt hour is used for cooling or for associated infrastructure. So it's a measure of the higher the number, the worse, right? And some of the legacy data centers out there have a PUE of 1.8 or 2. A lot of the on-premise stuff that companies use, where you have, you know, a few servers in a cupboard and you know, some fans or coolers or air conditioning, can be 2. I mean, you're wasting double, you know, the same amount of energy as you are in using the actual service. And at Hydro66, we're down at 1.07 or less, because we have this really innovative free air design, which is really designed to make the most of the natural cold environment. We reuse the heat from the servers to recirculate, because if it's, I mean, up there just now it's like minus 20, 25. So we're right on the edge of the Arctic Circle. But you don't want to blast your servers with minus 25 degrees centigrade air. So you recirculate some of that air and you bring it up to a set point of 17, 18 degrees. And everything's happy. But this is obviously much better than running things, you know, where you've got to physically cool the air down with electricity.
I've read a couple of articles over the last few months about the impact of kind of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies on the impact of data centers, etc. So I understand that they require a huge amount of data center room and activity. Do you see that as a major? Will it have a major impact on not only the kind of society, but the industry as a whole.
Sorry, repeat that.
Sorry, I was reading Jane's message.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, we've had, I think there's a bit of, I think the Facebook event is,
it's
not in the event, is it?
Let's carry on, Jane, and we can just post the recorded session on the Facebook page afterwards.
Okay.
I think it
and if you want to link to it, I'm Janie Skuse.
yeah. I mean, do you want to share that the live one now, or should we? Are you just going to repost it?
I will repost it. It's live on my page if you'd like to link to it. It's at Janie Skuse. It should just be able to find it. Janie, Janie. Hopefully, there's nothing too overtly political in the last few days.
Unless you want, I mean, we can restart if you want on the, if there's people watching that live event page. I don't know how many people watch it live normally.
Not very many normally.
We have a few people on the Friday afternoon who are bored who log on, but
what do you think, Loic? It's up to you. I'm happy to restart if you'd like to, but well, it's entirely up to you.
Let's can we post a message on the event page just linking your site, and let's carry on, and then we'll post it up there afterwards. I think we probably hit a good flow, and just to start again.
I'm really sorry. So I've got 2 things on my list. 3 things on my list. Data cities outside of city centres was the first one, which I think you've talked about a bit. The 2 other things are cryptocurrency mining and data centres and Internet of Things, which I think will have a huge impact on, well, data processing. Dan, my husband, who knows a lot more about this than me, was talking about cryptocurrency mining taking up 50% of usage of some data centers. Is that a thing? I think a thing that will increase. I mean, there are all sorts of things that we don't think about that are going to take up an awful lot of capacity.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of kind of different uses for energy within a data center, and then there's all sorts of things beyond that kind of a category of crypto. I mean, the headline is Bitcoin, right? Which is you know, we've had it in the world for 12 years now. And the purpose of and it's genius. You know, if you go and read the original Bitcoin white paper, the method of solving the issue of digital cash and how do you stop somebody from spending the same, you know, string of bits twice, and how do you reach consensus across everybody using it, and not having inflation. It was absolutely visionary, and the way it's secured with proof of work is the only method that's really been shown to be kind of sustainable and secure. But there's a whole bunch of other applications and other projects under the broad heading of distributed finance, whether it is distributed exchanges or projects that are tracking activities. There's a lot of nonsense is spoken about crypto as well. You know, most of the time, if somebody comes to your business model that involves blockchain, you know, you should. The answer is you probably don't need it. You need a database. But for the applications that you do need it for, it is very good. I mean, there's no other way for getting you know, billions of dollars of value around the world at the click of a mouse, or indeed to enable and empower people in the unbanked to have access to funds. And I think we're going to see huge growth of that over the next period, the next years. And you know, some of these things do take energy, and that's why it's important where you are going to do that you put it in renewable locations. There's also a huge amount of energy that's being spent in what I would call big data. You know, the engines that are running underneath Facebook and in Google and Instagram's part of Facebook, but all the rest of it. It's not just about storing pictures of cats or videos of or TikTok videos. You know, it is. Yeah,
that's what everyone thinks, though, isn't it?
I mean, once you've stored it on the hard drive, it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. But it's the taking the information and inferring from it.
Yeah.
You know, running these things through neural networks so that it's the same it's the same technology that trains your iPhone to tell you what every picture is of. So if you put, you know, football or beach or concert into your iPhone photos, it will show you all the pictures. And how does it do that? It's because in a data center somewhere, a neural network has been thrown billions of images with tags that tell it what's in those images, and has learned to recognize it. And then that neural network is being applied on your phone, rather than it having to work out from first principles, what does a football look like, or what does a baseball game look like. So as we find more and more uses for technology and for AI, the underlying processing that powers that, whether it is, as you know, sending money from one continent to another instantly, or asking Alexa to you know, play some music, or tracking your fitness, or doing research. So here's a great example: doing research to help find vaccines and find cures for pandemics. There are some great projects that will take unused computing power in data centers and even on home PCs, and apply them to biomedical processes. The complexity of, you know, folding proteins and looking for new drugs has to be done by brute force.
Yeah.
And so that uses a lot of computing power and a lot of energy. You know, I've been running that on my home machine forever, and I think that's another great example of compute that uses a lot of power and a lot of capex, but is being used for ultimate good.
That's amazing, and I suppose the computing power of all of those machines working together is enormous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there must be downtime. There's always downtime in data centers.
I mean, it's the nice thing about distributed systems is that you've got, you know, if you're busy doing something on a machine, like for example, you're participating in a Facebook live stream or a Zoom about the future of energy, you know, you don't have to run it. You only use the thing when it's idle. So something like folding at home will use a GPU to do these calculations while the machine is idle, but not when you need to use it for its normal purpose.
It's exactly the same principles as having the distributed battery storage across
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, not all the batteries have to be in a state where we can discharge them or charge them. You know, that some batteries might be being used by the actual residents because it's cheaper for them to use it. But, you know, having that volume of connected distributed batteries gives us the ability to combine. They can do something, but on their own, it's very difficult to. So it's there's so many parallels between the two. But one thing which I found I often find interesting is that as a society, you know, the drive towards using more data, etc., to make improvements in, you know, net zero and medical advances, etc., is kind of pushing our demand of power up and up exponentially. And in our drive to try and improve things, you know, we can actually be having a reverse impact on society because of our increased use dependence on power and energy. So it's you know, I've always been a fan of the triple bottom line approach to looking at business, and, you know, making sure that you're not only looking at profits but also looking at the impact you have on the environment and your society around you. And I think that, you know, it kind of links into everything we're talking about today. But if we're driving towards net zero as a society, but we have to make sure that in our drive to get to net zero, we're not actually kind of making things worse for years to come down the line by making choices today, but will have an impact in a few years' time. So I'm always really pleased to see startups and other people thinking about things in different markets and different industries, and it kind of all comes together as a massive puzzle piece at one point, and it all kind of makes sense. So it's really I love talking about stuff like this because, you know, I think that sometimes when you read the news, and I think we've talked about this before, Jane, but sometimes you can feel very negative about the route to net zero, and because at a high level, the stuff you see on the news, you don't feel like we're
Paris Agreement.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're getting there.
No.
But then you speak to people who are trying to make it in their own industries and doing, really changing the way we look at things in their own industries. And that I think that when you see it at this kind of macro level, it starts making sense, and you start realizing that actually people are working towards the same goal, and we can get there. So it's I think we can really get a positive vibe out of talking about this kind of subject.
I think there's a whole building awareness as well of ideas around the circular economy.
Yeah.
So people, which also feeds into this, being much more aware of your impact in a broader sense than just financially. It ties into being aware of the environmental impact that your business has, of the choices that you make, whether they're sustainable choices, and that again feeds Andy's work, which is around giving people sustainable choices. I guess for those things, data storage is not going to end. I mean, I don't even know if it'll reach a point beyond which it's impossible. I don't know. I mean, if it's in exponential growth at the moment, is there a point at which we have to slow down? You mentioned earlier, I think Google have limited the number of full photographs they'll store for you. Now you have to store them in a lower resolution if you're storing over 10 million.
I mean, that's I think that's really just a capacity planning issue. There's no.
Is it? Do you think it's not we haven't reached the end of our?
No, I mean, definitely not. There's no limit in the end. It'd be like holding back, say, well, let's not move to color printing. Let's stay with black and white. Or
a wave of data usage is coming.
Or there's always people that who was it that said that that if the use of horse and carts in London keeps increasing at the current rate, then the streets of London will be buried under 6 feet of manure, right? Well, it doesn't happen.
No.
So what will happen is, there will be a lot more centralization, and Google and Facebook and everybody else will keep expanding their sites, but everybody just has to get more responsible in where they put their data centers and which clouds they use. And also technology gets more efficient. So, the amount that you can do for a given amount of power increases and increases and increases. But there's also great impact that you can have with small changes. And this, I think, speaks to, from what I know about what Resilient are doing, decisions that we all make in our individual houses and individual businesses, when you multiply it up by 20 million households, make a huge difference. So, we're on a river in Sweden with 4,200 megawatts of generation. That is more than all of the data centers in Europe combined.
Wow.
A lot more. In fact, there's one hydro station called Hares, which is the rabbit run or the hare run, which is a 980 megawatt hydro station. One dam, 980 megawatts. And that, going by CBRE, who are the kind of the industry research analysts and facility management experts, that is about equal to all of the conventional normal data centers for co-location in London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and Paris added together. That one dam. So we're not going to run out of power for data centers, but it's incumbent on us to use it, effectively, and to use it close to generation as well. Because when you put power down transmission lines, you get losses, and sending power from the north down to the south, you lose 5, 10, 15%, whatever. But at the same time, if all the households in the UK or across Europe made better energy choices, add that all together, and you get a huge impact. I mean, even our site, which is, megawatts and megawatts and megawatts of computing power, we have a ground source heat pump that we use to heat the office. Right? And I think you do. I think resilience. That's one of the things that you do just for normal domestic premises, isn't it?
Yeah, it's any kind of devices which are large consumers of power. We're connecting to our platform. So kind of heat pumps or EVs are. We keep on reading about the impact of EVs on our national network over the next few years, and they will have a massive impact. So.
But that's an example of a massive step up in demand.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the same kind of discussion around the horse and carts with the manure. Everybody's talking about the fact that all of these EVs is going to break the network, but I'm sure that when it actually happens, it's not going to, we're not going to be under mounds of manure. It's, we'll have the ability to manage and cope with that extra demand. But yeah, any kind of technologies like that are able to connect to the platform, so that we can not only help kind of make the case for the technology in the first place, because I think that it's always a bit the case when you're looking at zero emissions vehicles or solar panels for your home. It's a capital expense, and when you look at it over a 15-year period, it's very hard to make the business case for it to stack up. So we're there to try and add a certain revenue stream on top of the savings you can get, so that it starts making sense, so that more people will adopt it, so that we're all working towards the main goal of getting that net zero target. But also, it's the bigger picture. But if we have more flexibility in the network, if we're better managing all of these assets, which will be demanding a huge amount of power, then we can connect more renewable energy at a national level, and we can better manage the network. So it's it's local choices, national impact.
Structural change.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Definitely.
And there's also this impact of, if you reach the limits of industry, so you gave the example of the expansion of EV cars, right? There's not enough battery factories.
No.
And the biggest expense in an electric vehicle is the big battery pack.
Yeah.
So what does the industry do? It builds massive, great new battery factories. The Tesla gigafactories, the VW sites in Germany, and Northvolt, which is building a massive site just maybe 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers south of us in Sweden, where they are using, again, and the battery production process is actually quite energy intensive as well. But they're building this very efficient and huge site, so that there'll be enough battery chemicals produced, the substrate for the cells to then be manufactured elsewhere in Europe and so on. So, the market will respond and will provide the necessary to make it happen, but we all need the will to make these choices, whether it is in choosing a green cloud or in choosing a green vehicle.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
At which point, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add? Anything you're doing imminently that you'd like to tell people about, or shall we wind up and go out into the sunshine on this lovely afternoon?
I think we're definitely going to reconsider our data storage as a business. I'm going to be definitely probably speaking to you offline around how we can move it, because I think it's important to. I think it's so easy to just forget about all of the different steps. So I think we like to practice what we preach. So we'll definitely be doing that.
Well, there's also something that, classically there's this idea that, in order to be good, it's going to cost you more money. So you get that kind of letter through from your power company that said, I use Bulb in the UK, and it's cheap and it's renewable, right? But it's like, well, do you want 10p a kilowatt hour for dirty power, or 15p a kilowatt hour for green power? It's the same electrons probably, but what's happening? Actually, it doesn't necessarily. Being green and being responsible doesn't have to cost more. So when you look at traditional clouds, and some of which are not very green in the way that they power themselves, and you look at building the same infrastructure on something like H66 cloud, it's actually greener, and it's cheaper, because it's newer technology and it's more efficient, and we don't have to waste so much power and so on. So it isn't always the case of, I've got to spend more to be better. And the same thing applies to companies, right? If they're hosting huge amounts of equipment in Slough, which is another big data center location, or Docklands or Frankfurt or Paris, it's like, well, why? It's not 1998 anymore, guys. You need to get with the program and go where the power is cheap and green, and take the data to the power, not the other way.
Cool.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Andy. It's
Yeah,
been really interesting. And I hope to speak to you soon. And look, I'll stop the live stream. Thank you to people who managed to find us on on my page, and we'll post out later in the right places on Loic's page, on Resilience Energy, and we'll also post this on YouTube and post.